At 36 years old, Malachi earned a salary of $102,000 as a senior benefits analyst for the California Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS. He lived a life of quiet order, governed by spreadsheets and actuarial tables. His world was one of predictable inputs and logical outcomes. On Thursday, at 1:17 p.m., that world was obliterated by a single phone call. He was sitting in his cubicle on the 17th floor of the Lincoln Plaza North Tower, the glass walls of the CalPERS headquarters offering a panoramic, emotionally distant view of downtown Sacramento. The afternoon sun glinted off the steel and glass, a sterile, silent fire. He had just finished reconciling a particularly complex pension fund, the numbers aligning with a satisfying click in his mind. The day before, he had made the final payment on a debt that had overshadowed his life for 5 long years. A weight of $90,347.18 now reduced to zero. He had felt a lightness he hadn't experienced since his 20s. It was a feeling of pure, unburdened freedom. His phone, a modest Samsung Galaxy A53 that cost him $450, buzzed on the desk beside his keyboard. The caller ID read, Amare, his younger cousin. Malachi smiled, assuming it was a call about their weekend plans to go fishing on the American River. He picked it up. Hey, Mayor, what's up? The voice on the other end was not the easygoing baritone he expected. It was tight, strained, and low. Kai, you need to stop what you're doing and listen to me. Are you somewhere you can talk? Malachi's posture straightened. The background noise on Amare's end was the clatter of ceramic and the murmur of conversation. A cafe. I'm at my desk, but I can be private. What's wrong? You sound... I'm at the mill on I Street, Amare said, his voice dropping to a whisper. Zaya is here. With her friend Raina. They're at the table next to me. Kai? I heard something. I don't know how to tell you this, so I'm just going to say it. I'm recording it now. I'll send it to you. Just listen to it. Don't call her. Don't do anything until you listen, okay? A cold dread, foreign and sharp, pierced through the quiet satisfaction of his morning. Zaya was supposed to be at her marketing job. A recording? Amare, what are you talking about? What did you hear? Just listen, Amare repeated, his voice firm with a protective urgency that chilled Malachi to the bone. I'm sending it now. I'm so sorry, man. I'm so sorry. The line went dead. A moment later, a notification appeared on his phone. A new audio file from Amare. Malachi's hands, usually so steady as they navigated complex financial data, trembled slightly as he reached for his $30 Sony earbuds. He plugged them into his phone, the silence of his cubicle suddenly feeling immense and suffocating. The glass tower felt less like a symbol of stability and more like a cage. He took a deep breath, the sterile, recycled air doing nothing to calm the frantic hammering in his chest. He pressed play. He had no idea that the next 3 minutes and 47 seconds would methodically dismantle his entire life. He thought yesterday was the end of a long, hard chapter. He had no idea it was merely the prelude to the real devastation. The decision had been made 5 years earlier, on a cool Tuesday evening in the living room of his Curtis Park bungalow. It was a modest house, just under 1,000 square feet, with a sturdy oak tree in the front yard. He'd bought it for $280,000 2 years before he even met Zaya, using a down payment he'd saved with monastic discipline since his first job out of college. It was his sanctuary, a place of quiet pride. Zaya had been crying. She sat on the edge of their comfortable, if slightly worn, $900 crate and barrel sofa, a pile of opened envelopes on the coffee table before her. They were credit card statements and letters from a student loan servicer, their bold, red, past due stamps, like little wounds on the paper. She was a beautiful woman, with luminous deep brown skin and elegant long fingers that were currently twisted together in distress. "I didn't know it had gotten this bad," she whispered, tears tracing paths down her cheeks. "It just piled up. A little here, a little there." Malachi sat beside her, his heart aching at her distress. He looked at the numbers. They were staggering. $58,000 in high-interest credit card debt across 4 cards. A relic from her early 20s, when she'd tried to maintain a lifestyle far beyond her entry-level salary. Another $32,000 in private student loans for a fashion marketing certificate she'd never even used. The total, with interest and penalties, was just over $90,000. "Okay," Malachi said, his voice calm and steady. He was a man who solved problems. This was just a very large, very expensive problem. "Okay, we'll fix this, together." Zaya looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mixture of hope and shame. "But how, Kai? My salary is only $55,000. After rent on my old place and everything, I was drowning. We can't possibly manage this on top of our other expenses." He had already done the math in his head. Her minimum payments alone were nearly $1,500 a month, with interest rates hovering around 24%. They would be treading water for decades. There was only one way to get ahead of it. One way to kill the beast before it consumed their future. "I'll take a loan from my 401k, he said, the words feeling heavy and monumental. "It's the only way to get a lump sum large enough to consolidate this and kill the high interest rates. We can get a loan for up to 50% of the vested balance. For me, that's about $45,000. Zaya's eyes widened. "Kai, no. That's your retirement? Your future?" "It's our future," he corrected gently. "This is our problem now. We'll use the $45,000 to wipe out the highest interest credit cards. For the rest, I'll figure it out. I'll pick up extra work." "I love you so much," she'd sobbed, throwing her arms around him, her relief palpable. "I promise, I will make this up to you. We'll pay it back, every single cent. We'll be so good. No more stupid spending. We'll be a team." He believed her. He held her tight and felt a surge of purpose. He would slay this dragon for her, for them. The next day, he logged into his CalPERS account and initiated the loan. The $45,000 disappeared from his retirement savings, a number that represented years of careful, consistent contributions. The money landed in their joint account, and within a week, the most toxic of her debts were gone. The remaining balance was around $45,000. That Friday, Malachi signed up to be an Uber driver. His 2015 Honda Accord, a reliable car with 80,000 miles that he'd paid off years ago, became his second office. For the next 5 years, his life fell into a grueling rhythm. From Monday to Friday, he was a senior analyst, managing billions in public funds. But from Friday night until Sunday evening, and often 2 or 3 weeknights as well, he was Kai, the Uber driver, navigating the streets of Sacramento for fares that ranged from $7 to $25. He drove the late-night shifts, the airport runs, the bar crowd after a last call. He learned the city in a new way, not as a grid of streets, but as a web of potential earnings. He sacrificed sleep, weekends, and time with friends. Vacations were out of the question. An anniversary trip to Hawaii they had talked about, a trip that would have cost around $4,000, was indefinitely postponed. He packed his lunch every day, simple meals of chicken and rice that cost less than $4 to prepare, while Zaya, who now worked in marketing for a boutique firm and made a respectable $65,000, often bought her lunch at trendy midtown cafes, spending $18 on avocado toast and a latte. He never complained. Every dollar he earned from Uber, after gas and expenses, went directly to Zaya's debt. He averaged about $1,000 a month from the extra work. He meticulously tracked it all in a spreadsheet, a private ledger of his sacrifice. The numbers became his mantra. $55,000 from 5 years of driving, $45,000 from his retirement. He was pouring his life force into erasing her past. Zaya seemed appreciative at first. In the early years, she'd sometimes have dinner waiting for him when he stumbled in at 1 a.m., his back aching from the driver's seat. But as time went on, a subtle shift occurred. The gratitude was replaced by expectation, and the expectation by a quiet resentment. Their life, dictated by his grueling schedule and their tight budget, was not the glamorous existence she had envisioned. The facade of their domestic normalcy was beginning to crack, revealing the strain beneath. The outrage didn't accumulate in a single, explosive moment. It was a slow drip poison, a series of 1,000 small cuts that he had, at the time, dismissed as minor frustrations. In retrospect, they were signposts on the road to betrayal, bright red flags he had chosen to ignore. The first major cut came about a year into the plan. It was a Saturday night close to 2 a.m. Rain was lashing against the windows of their Curtis Park bungalow. Malachi had just gotten home, soaked and exhausted after a 6-hour Uber shift that had netted him a meager $112. He peeled off his damp jacket and sat heavily on the edge of the bed, where Zaya was propped up against pillows, the glow of her $1,200 iPhone 11 Pro illuminating her face as she scrolled through Instagram. She didn't look up. "Slow night?" she asked, her tone absent. "Yeah, the rain keeps people in," he said, rubbing his tired eyes. She sighed, a sound of profound boredom. "I was just looking at Brianna's pictures from her trip to Cabo. It looks amazing. We never do anything fun anymore, Kai. We never go anywhere." A flash of anger, hot and sharp, went through him. He was tired. His back hurt. He had just spent his Saturday night chauffeuring drunk college students to pay for a debt he didn't incur. "We can't go anywhere, Zaya," he said, trying to keep his voice even. "We're trying to pay off this debt, remember?" That was the plan. She finally looked at him, her expression a mixture of annoyance and pity. "I know the plan, Malachi. I'm just so tired of it. This isn't a life. It's just waiting. Saving is so boring." He didn't have the energy to argue. He just nodded, the anger curdling into a familiar, heavy resignation. He was doing this for her, for them, but she saw it as a prison. He saw it as a path to freedom. They were looking at the same map but seeing two entirely different destinations. Another cut came on her 30th birthday, 2 years into the debt repayment. He knew they couldn't afford anything extravagant, but he wanted to get her something special. He spent weeks searching, finally finding a delicate, handmade silver bracelet from a local artisan at the Midtown Farmers Market. It cost $150, a significant splurge on their budget, but he loved its simple elegance. He thought it was perfect. He presented it to her over a home-cooked dinner, a $70 steak he'd bought as a treat. She opened the small box, looked at the bracelet, and gave him a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Oh," she said. "It's very nice, honey. Thank you." She put it on, but he saw her take it off before they went to bed. He found it a week later in the back of her jewelry box, tucked away behind flashier, cheaper costume jewelry. That same night, while he was getting ready for bed, he glanced over her shoulder and saw her iPad screen. She was on the Cartier website, staring at a picture of the $3,500 Cartier Love bracelet. The contrast between his heartfelt $150 gift and her multi-$1,000 desire was a chasm he couldn't cross. The humiliations often came from her family. Zaya's parents lived in a sprawling, perfectly manicured $1.5 million home in Land Park, a world away from the humble charm of Curtis Park. Her father was a successful developer, and they had never approved of Malachi's quiet, frugal lifestyle. At a family barbecue, Zaya's mother, a woman who wore her wealth like armor in the form of a $5,000 Chanel jacket, even at a casual event, made a comment that stung. "Malachi, is that your Honda out front?" she asked, her voice carrying across the pristine patio. "The practical one?" "It's just, Zaya's brother just got the new Audi Q5, a $60,000 car. It has the most wonderful safety features. You must be so careful driving for that ride service you do." All eyes turned to him. He felt Zaya tense beside him. He waited for her to defend him, to say that his practical car was part of a sacrifice they were making together. Instead, she just gave a tight, embarrassed laugh and changed the subject. She didn't defend him. She was ashamed of him, ashamed of the very sacrifice he was making for her. In that moment, sitting on her parents' expensive outdoor furniture, he had never felt more alone. As they entered the fifth and final year, her sense of entitlement grew in proportion to the shrinking debt. The closer they got to zero, the more distant she became. Her conversations were no longer about us, but about my future. She started talking constantly about moving. "I saw the most amazing modern house for sale near McKinley Park," she said one evening, showing him a listing on her phone. The price was $950,000. Can you imagine? Floor-to-ceiling windows, a chef's kitchen. We could finally host proper parties. It would be so much better than this cramped old bungalow. He looked around the living room of the house he owned, the house that had been his anchor and would be theirs, debt-free. It wasn't cramped, it was cozy. It wasn't old, it had character. But to her, it was a symbol of the modest life she was desperate to escape. "Zaya, a house like that? The mortgage would be $5,000 a month. We just got out of debt. The point was to be free, not to jump into a bigger prison." "It's not a prison, Kai. It's an investment," she'd snapped, her voice sharp with frustration. "It's about living a better life, the life we deserve. I've done my time being frugal. I'm ready to live now. I've done my time." The words echoed in his head, as if she were the one who had sacrificed, as if she were the one driving strangers around at midnight. The final scene of their 5-year charade took place on a Wednesday night, the night before Amari's call. Malachi had logged into the last loan portal and clicked Submit Payment. A screen popped up with green letters. "Congratulations! Your loan has been paid in full. Your account balance is $0. A wave of profound, bone-deep relief washed over him. He had done it. It was over. $90,000, 5 years, countless hours, and one depleted 401k later, they were free. He turned the laptop screen to Zaya. "Look," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "We did it. It's done." She leaned over and glanced at the screen. She gave him a quick, perfunctory kiss on the cheek, her eyes barely registering the magnitude of the moment. Her gaze was already distant, fixed on a future he wasn't a part of. "Finally," she said, a small, satisfied smile playing on her lips. "Now we can finally start living." He smiled back, a genuine, hopeful smile. He thought she meant their life. He thought this was the beginning of their reward, the start of their shared, unburdened future. He had no idea she was speaking only for herself. Back in the sterile quiet of his 17th floor cubicle, Malachi pressed play. The audio file from Amari started not with voices, but with the ambient sounds of a busy cafe, the hiss of an espresso machine, the clinking of a fork against a ceramic plate, the low thrum of indistinct conversations. It was the Mill, a place he and Zaya had been to a few times. He could picture it perfectly. The minimalist decor, the expensive pastries, the crowd of people who performed their leisure with an air of effortless style. Then, a voice he recognized as Raina, Zaya's closest friend. Her voice was giddy, conspiratorial. So it's really done? All of it? The whole 90K? And then, Zaya's voice. It was smooth, triumphant, and utterly devoid of the warmth he thought he knew. Every last penny, she said, and he could hear the smile in her words. He showed me the zero balance last night. Can you believe it? 5 years? 5 years of my life stuck in that boring little house, pretending to be happy with, well, you know. A light, dismissive laugh followed. Raina's voice again. Oh my God, Z, you actually did it. You survived. So what's next? You finally going to get him to sell that little shoebox and buy that big place in Land Park you were looking at? There was a pause. Malachi could hear Zaya take a slow, deliberate sip of her drink. It was the sound of a performer savoring their big reveal. No, Zaya said, her voice dropping into a tone of pure, delicious satisfaction. Now I can finally leave him. The words hit Malachi like a physical blow. The air left his lungs. The glass walls of his office seemed to warp and shimmer. He felt a profound, ringing silence in his ears, though the recording continued to play. Raina gasped dramatically. Shut up? Zaya, are you serious? After all this? After he paid it all off? Paid it off? Zaya scoffed, and the sound was the ugliest thing Malachi had ever heard. Raina, please. He didn't pay it off. He restored the balance. That was my debt, sure, but he married me. It became our problem. He just fixed the problem he signed up for. It was his duty as a husband. I see it as severance. 5 years of my life, my youth, spent living his cheap, boring life. $90,000 sounds about right for that. Malachi's blood ran cold. Severance. The word was so clinical, so transactional. She saw his sacrifice not as an act of love, but as a payment for services rendered. But what about the house? Raina asked, her voice a mix of shock and vicarious excitement. You'll get half, right? You could walk away with like 200 grand. That's the plan, Zaya said confidently. It's a community asset now. We've lived there for 5 years. My name is on the utility bills. I've helped with improvements. Malachi's mind flashed to the $800 she had insisted they spend on new throw pillows and a trendy rug for the living room, a purchase he'd argued against. My lawyer says it's a slam dunk. We sell the house, I take my half, and I finally get the down payment I need for a place of my own, a real place. And I'll probably get spousal support for a while too. His salary is over $100,000, you know. He can afford it. He felt a wave of nausea. She had already consulted a lawyer. This wasn't a new idea. This was a long-term, calculated plan. The past 5 years of his life, his sacrifice, his late nights and lost weekends, were not the foundation of their future together. They were the runway for her escape. Wow, Raina breathed. You really thought this all through. Of course I did, Zaya said, her voice dripping with condescension. You don't think I was just going to settle, do you? Malachi is a good man. A sweet, simple, stable man. He was a perfect man. For my 20s. To get me on my feet. To clean up my mess. But I'm 31 now. I need more. I want passion. I want travel. I want a life that isn't budgeted down to the last penny. He served his purpose. Now it's time for me to move on. He served his purpose. The phrase echoed in the silent chamber of his skull. He was a tool, a financial instrument, a bridge she had built to get from her irresponsible past to her glamorous future. A bridge she now intended to burn without a second thought. The recording ended with the sound of their laughter. It was light, carefree, and monstrous. Malachi slowly pulled the earbuds out. The normal sounds of the office returned, but they sounded distant and muted, as if coming from another world. He looked at his hands, which were now perfectly still. The trembling was gone, replaced by an absolute crystalline stillness. The grief and shock that had momentarily paralyzed him were already hardening into something else, something cold, methodical, and clear. He looked out the window at the city of Sacramento spread below him. It was no longer just a view. It was a map of his life. His little bungalow in Curtis Park, her parents' mansion in Land Park, this glass tower of logic and rules. She thought she had a plan. She thought she was smart. But she had made a critical mistake. She had underestimated the quiet, simple man who spent his days ensuring that everything added up, that every debt was paid, and that every account was balanced. The rain began that evening, a cold, persistent drizzle that matched the icy resolve solidifying in Malachi's chest. The drive home from the CalPERS building was an exercise in supreme control. He kept his 2015 Honda Accord at exactly the speed limit, his hands at 10 and 2 on the wheel. He was no longer a husband driving home to his wife. He was a strategist returning to an active theater of operations. The man who had left for work that morning, full of hope and relief, was gone. In his place was someone else, a man Zaya had never met. He walked into the bungalow on 2nd Avenue at 6:15 p.m. The house smelled of garlic and herbs. Zaya was in the kitchen, humming along to a playlist on her phone. She was wearing a pair of comfortable but stylish lounge pants that probably cost $150 and a soft cashmere sweater. She looked up and smiled, a bright, false smile that now looked grotesque to him. "Hey, honey, hard day?" she asked, stirring a pot on the stove. "You could say that?" Malachi said, his voice a flat, neutral tone he didn't recognize as his own. This was his first lie, the first scene in the grim play he now had to perform. He had to act normal. He had to gather his forces before she ever knew there was a war. "Well, I decided to make that pasta dish you like," she said, gesturing to the bubbling sauce. "A little celebration for us. For being free." Free. The word hung in the air between them, now holding two violently different meanings. For him, it had meant freedom with her. For her, it meant freedom from him. He felt a surge of cold fury but pushed it down, burying it deep beneath a layer of manufactured calm. "That's nice of you," he said, setting his work bag down. "Smells good." They ate dinner at the small wooden table in their dining nook. The rain tapped a gentle rhythm against the window pane. It was a scene of domestic tranquility, a perfect picture of a happy marriage. But for Malachi, it was an interrogation chamber where he was both the detective and the victim. Every word she spoke was now evidence. "It was so great catching up with Rena today," Zaya said, twirling pasta onto her fork. This was her first lie of the evening. "We had brunch at the mill. We were just talking and laughing, celebrating the debt finally being gone. It felt so good to just breathe." Malachi watched her face. She was a phenomenal actress. There was no flicker of deceit in her eyes, only the serene confidence of someone who believed she held all the cards. "Sounds nice," he managed. "What did you guys talk about?" "Oh, you know," she said with a casual wave of her hand. "Girl stuff, future plans, dreams. It just feels like anything is possible now, you know?" She looked at him, her eyes shining. "I was even looking at some open houses on Zillow, just for fun." This was her second lie. It wasn't for fun, it was reconnaissance. "Oh yeah?" he asked, forcing a casual tone. "Where at?" "This gorgeous place near McKinley Park," she said, her voice full of genuine-sounding excitement. "It's a bit of a dream, of course, but can you imagine us there, Kai? A big backyard for parties, a modern kitchen, so much better than this old place." She looked around the bungalow with a faint, dismissive wrinkle of her nose. The bungalow, that was his. The bungalow that had sheltered them while he worked himself to the bone for her. He took a slow sip of water, the glass cool against his lips. He needed to anchor himself. The recording played in his mind. "You don't think I was just going to settle, do you?" "It's a lot of house, Zaya," he said, repeating the lines he'd spoken just weeks before, but this time they were part of his act. "A lot of mortgage." I know," she said, patting his hand. "But we can dream, can't we? Now that we're not bogged down by all that debt. Thanks to you." The casualness of her gratitude was what twisted the knife. It was an afterthought, a box she needed to check. He just nodded, unable to form a response. The rest of the dinner passed in a haze of her cheerful chatter about the future. A future she was painting for him that he knew was a complete fabrication. He was a ghost at his own table, listening to the plans for a life he was about to be evicted from. Later, as they were getting ready for bed, she came up behind him and wrapped her arms around his waist. He flinched internally, but forced his body to remain still. She rested her chin on his shoulder. "Thank you for everything, Kai," she whispered, her breath warm against his neck. This was her third and most devastating lie of the night. "Paying all that off, it means the world to me. You gave me a fresh start. Now our real life can begin." He turned slowly in her arms to face her. He looked into her eyes, searching for any sign of the woman he thought he had married. He found nothing. There was only a beautiful, confident stranger who saw him as a stepping stone. A quiet, devastating line came to him, a line he wished he could say. "Whose real life, Zaya?" Instead, he leaned in and gave her a chaste kiss on the forehead. "You're welcome," he said. The words felt like ash in his mouth. She went to sleep quickly, breathing the easy, untroubled breaths of the righteous. Malachi lay beside her in the dark, his eyes wide open, staring at the ceiling. The rain continued to fall. He didn't sleep. He spent the entire night listening to the sound of the rain and the echo of her voice in the recording, planning his response. It would not be emotional. It would not be loud. It would be precise, methodical, and final. It would be a perfectly balanced ledger of consequence. Friday morning at 8 a.m. was gray and overcast, the remnants of the previous night's storm clinging to the city. Malachi was not at his desk at CalPERS. He was sitting in a leather wingback chair in the hushed, wood-paneled office of Diana Sterling, Esquire. Her office, on the top floor of a building overlooking Capitol Park, was the antithesis of his life with Zaya. It was a space of quiet, expensive power. Ms. Sterling's reputation preceded her. She was known as the sharpest, most ruthless family law attorney in Sacramento. Her hourly rate was $750, a sum that would have made Malachi break out in a cold sweat 2 days ago. Today it felt like a necessary investment. He was wearing his only good suit, a classic navy wool from Brooks Brothers that he'd bought for $600 5 years ago for a wedding. He'd kept it in a garment bag, pristine and waiting for an occasion. He never imagined this would be it. Ms. Sterling, a formidable black woman in her late 50s with her hair in elegant silver-streaked twists and wearing a tailored St. John suit that likely cost more than his car's blue book value, listened without interruption. Her face was impassive, but her eyes were sharp, missing nothing. Malachi laid out the story with the same dispassionate clarity he would use to explain a benefits calculation. He started with the $90,347.18 of premarital debt. He detailed the 5-year plan. He spoke of the 401k loan and the Uber driving. He did not speak of his exhaustion or humiliation. He spoke only of the numbers. Then he placed a small stack of documents on the polished mahogany desk between them. "I brought everything I thought you would need," he said, his voice steady. The first document was the grant deed for the Curtis Park bungalow, clearly dated May 14, 2015. Their wedding was in June of 2017. "The house is in my name only, purchased with my own funds prior to the marriage. The next was the loan statement from his CalPERS 401k showing a disbursement of $45,000 on November 2nd, 2017. Beside it, he placed a thick, spiral-bound report. This is a spreadsheet I maintained for the last 5 years. It details every dollar I earned driving for Uber and every transfer made from our joint account to her personal credit card and student loan accounts. The Uber earnings total, $55,821. The payments to her debt total $90,347.18. I have the corresponding bank statements for every single transaction. Ms. Sterling picked up the spreadsheet, her eyebrows raising slightly as she noted the meticulous detail. She looked impressed. "And this," Malachi said, pushing his phone forward, "is the reason I'm here." He connected the phone to a small speaker on her desk and pressed play. Zaya's voice filled the quiet office, bright and cruel. "I see it as severance. 5 years of my life, my youth, spent living his cheap, boring life. $90,000 sounds about right for that." When the recording finished, Diana Sterling was silent for a long moment. The impassive mask had fallen away, replaced by a look of cold, controlled fury on Malachi's behalf. She took a slow breath and folded her hands on her desk. "Mr. Jackson," she said, her voice a low, powerful instrument. "In 25 years of practicing law, I have seen a great deal of marital fraud. But this is exceptionally brazen and exceptionally stupid." She leaned forward. "Your wife has made a series of critical errors. First, she confessed her fraudulent intent to a third party. Second, the third party recorded it. In California, a one-party consent state, that recording of a conversation in a public place where there is no reasonable expectation of privacy is perfectly admissible. It is a silver bullet." A weight Malachi hadn't even realized he was carrying began to lift. Her belief that she is entitled to half the value of your home is, to put it mildly, mistaken, Ms. Sterling continued, her voice sharp as steel. "The house is your sole and separate property. While she might try to argue for a share of the appreciation in value during the marriage, her admission on this recording that her entire plan was to use you to pay her debt and then seize your assets will obliterate that claim. We will argue fraudulent inducement from the very start. The marriage itself was a financial transaction for her." She paused, her gaze intense. "As for the $90,347.18, normally funds used to pay down one spouse's premarital debt from community efforts can be difficult to recover. However, this recording changes everything. It proves this was not a gift. It was the result of a deliberate, calculated calculated deception. We will not just ask for a reimbursement. We will file for damages based on fraud. We will get a judgment against her for the full amount. We will garnish her wages until you are made whole." Malachi felt a profound sense of vindication. It wasn't about the money. It was about the truth. It was about the balancing of the scales. "What's the plan?" he asked. Ms. Sterling smiled. A thin, dangerous smile. "The plan is to act with overwhelming force and speed. She believes she is in control. We will demonstrate in no uncertain terms that she is not. First, we filed the petition for dissolution this morning. With it, we will file a request for an emergency ex parte order to freeze all joint assets, citing this recording as evidence of impending financial malfeasance. The judge will grant it. Second, you will go to your bank and execute that order. Third, we will have her served. Not at home, not at work. We will have her served publicly, in the middle of the day, while she is celebrating the victory she believes she has won." The strategy was ruthless. It was precise. It was everything he needed it to be. "I agree," Malachi said without hesitation. "Let's begin." The strike was executed with the precision of a military operation. It began at 11:05 a.m. on Friday. In her quiet, powerful office, Diana Sterling personally oversaw the electronic filing of Jackson versus Jackson. The petition for dissolution was standard, but the attached exhibits and declarations were anything but. Exhibit A was the full transcript of the audio recording. Exhibit B was Malachi's spreadsheet, a 5-year testament to his labor. The request for the ex parte order was granted by a family court judge within the hour, a testament to the shocking clarity of the evidence. At 11:30 a.m., Malachi walked into the branch of his credit union on J Street. He was no longer the deferential husband trying to save a few dollars. He was a man executing a legal strategy. He presented the court order, stamped and signed, to the branch manager. The manager, a man who had helped him set up the joint account years ago, read the document, his eyes widening. Without a word, he typed into his computer, the joint savings account, containing a modest balance of $4,328, the last of Malachi's Uber earnings from the previous weekend, was frozen, and its contents transferred to a new account in Malachi's name only. The first pillar of Zaya's new life had been kicked out from under her. The final phase was timed for 1:30 p.m. Diana Sterling's investigator had made a quick call to Raina's office under a simple pretext and learned that Zaya, Raina, and another friend were having a big celebration lunch at Beast Plus Bounty, a trendy, expensive restaurant in Sacramento's Ice Blocks development, known for its $25 craft cocktails and beautiful clientele. At 1:32 p.m., Zaya was laughing, holding a glass of sparkling rosé that cost $18. She was telling her friends about the gorgeous house she'd found on Zillow, painting a picture of the life she was about to begin. She felt powerful, attractive, and on the cusp of everything she had ever wanted. A man in a nondescript polo shirt and slacks approached their table. He was polite, professional, and completely impassive. "Excuse me, are you Zaya Williams?" Zaya looked up, annoyed at the interruption. "It's Zaya Jackson," she corrected, a hint of pride in her voice at the name she was so eager to shed. "Close enough," the man said flatly. He extended a large manila envelope. "You've been served." Her friends fell silent. Zaya stared at him, then at the envelope, a confused, embarrassed laugh escaping her lips. "Is this a joke? Kai didn't—" The man was already walking away. Her hands trembled slightly as she took the envelope. Her friends watched, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and concern. She tore it open, her forced smile faltering as she pulled out the thick stack of papers. Her eyes scanned the first page. Superior Court of California, County of Sacramento petition for dissolution of marriage. The color drained from her face. She went white, then a sickly pale green. The words swam before her eyes. Petitioner, Malachi Jackson. Respondent, Zaya Jackson. Her hand flew to her mouth. Her friends were asking what was wrong, but she couldn't hear them. She frantically flipped through the pages, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She saw the financial declarations, the property lists, and then she saw it. A single line that made her blood freeze. Based on evidence of fraudulent inducement and financial malfeasance, as detailed in Exhibit A, audio recording, dated November 16th. A recording, the brunch, Amare. Amare was Malachi's cousin. A wave of pure, sickening horror washed over her. She had been caught. Her entire carefully constructed plan, her monologue of triumph delivered to Raina, was now evidence against her in a court of law. She fumbled for her phone, her fingers clumsy. She had to call Kai. She had to fix this. She excused herself from the table, rushing toward the restroom, her heart pounding in her ears. She dialed his number. It went straight to voicemail. At 1:45 p.m., Malachi's phone, sitting silently on the coffee table at his cousin Amari's apartment, lit up with the first transcribed voicemail. He did not listen to it. He simply read the text. Voicemail 1. Kai, what is this? What the hell is going on? This is some kind of sick joke, right? You need to call me right now and fix this. Angry, confused, he deleted it. At 2:15 p.m., the bill for their lunch arrived. Zaya, flustered and trying to maintain a shred of composure in front of her friends, offered to pay. She handed the server her debit card, the one linked to their joint account. A few minutes later, the server returned, looking apologetic. I'm so sorry, ma'am, but this card was declined. The public humiliation was absolute. Her friends stared. Raina, realizing the implications of the recording, looked horrified. Zaya's face burned with shame. She had to ask one of her friends to cover the $180 bill. Another voicemail appeared on Malachi's phone. Voicemail 2. They declined the card, Malachi. My card. What did you do? Did you freeze the account? You can't do that. That's our money. Panicked, furious, he deleted it. He sat in the quiet of Amari's living room, the muted sounds of a basketball game on TV in the background. He felt nothing. No triumph, no anger. Just the cold, clean feeling of a complex equation finally being solved. By 3 p.m., Zaya had fled the restaurant and was in her car, parked on a side street, frantically reading every word of the petition. She saw the claim for $90,347.18. She saw the assertion that the bungalow was his separate property. The life she had been designing for herself was not just unraveling. It was being systematically erased. Voicemail 3. A recording? What recording? Kai, you have to talk to me. This is all a huge misunderstanding. We can fix this. Please, please, just call me. Pleading. The dawning horror now complete. Deleted. By 5 p.m., the pleading had morphed into desperate lies. Voicemail 4. It was just girl talk, Kai. It didn't mean anything. You know how we get. I was just venting. I didn't mean any of it. I love you. You can't do this to me. I love you. Deleted. The final voicemail of the day came late in the evening. The anger and pleading were gone, replaced by the ragged sounds of sobbing. Voicemail 5. You've ruined my life. How could you be so cruel? After everything I did for us, after all my support, you've destroyed everything. You're a monster, Malachi. He read the words, a bitter irony washing over him. She was trying to flip the script, to cast herself as the victim. But the numbers didn't lie. The recording didn't lie. He deleted the message and finally powered his phone off. The strike was complete. The consequences would now cascade. The aftermath was not a dramatic explosion, but a quiet, systematic dismantling of the life Zaya believed she was owed. The consequences cascaded, each one a direct and logical result of the choices she had made, all laid out with the cold precision of a legal filing. First, the house. The court, presented with the premarital deed and the damning audio recording, wasted no time. A judge immediately affirmed the Curtis Park bungalow as Malachi's sole and separate property. Zaya's claim that it was a community asset was dismissed with prejudice. The legal term Diana Sterling used was laughable. Zaya was served with a notice to vacate, giving her 30 days to remove her personal belongings. One rainy Saturday, her father arrived in his $120,000 Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon, its engine rumbling with disapproval on the quiet street. He and Zaya loaded her designer clothes, her collection of expensive shoes, and her trendy home decor into the back. Malachi was not there. He stayed at Amar's, leaving the key under the mat. When he returned, the house was empty of her presence, but it felt fuller, lighter. It was his again. Second, the debt. This was the centerpiece of the judgment. In a closed-door hearing, the judge listened to the entire 3-minute and 47-second recording. When it was over, he looked at Zaya, who was sitting beside her expensive lawyer, and his expression was one of profound contempt. The finding of fraudulent inducement was swift and unequivocal. The court ruled that the $90,347.18 was not a gift, nor a shared marital burden, but a debt incurred by Malachi under false pretenses. A judgment was entered against Zaya for the full amount. Diana Sterling filed the necessary paperwork immediately, and a wage garnishment order was put in place. 15% of every paycheck Zaya earned would be automatically deducted and sent to Malachi until the debt was repaid in full. It would take her, the court estimated, over a decade. Third, the lifestyle. The wage garnishment, combined with her exorbitant legal fees, was a devastating financial blow. Her $65,000 salary was suddenly reduced to a take-home pay she couldn't live on. She could no longer afford the rent on the stylish $2,200 a month midtown loft she had moved into after leaving the bungalow. With her credit ruined by the new judgment, she couldn't qualify for a cheaper apartment. The ultimate humiliation came when she was forced to move back into her childhood bedroom in her parents' Grand Land Park home. At 31 years old, she was once again living under her parents' roof, subject to their quiet disappointment and her mother's endless, cutting remarks about her poor choices. The shame was a constant, suffocating companion. Fourth, the car. Her white BMW 3 Series, the $43,000 status symbol she adored, became an unaffordable luxury. The $650 monthly payment was impossible. She was forced to sell it, taking a significant loss because it was a private sale made under duress. With the small amount of money she cleared, she bought a 10-year-old high-mileage Honda Civic for $7,000. Driving the dented, anonymous car around the pristine streets of Land Park was a daily reminder of how far she had fallen. Fifth, the social circle. News of the divorce, and more importantly, the reason for it, spread like wildfire through her social set. Raina, in a desperate act of self-preservation, told everyone the full story, painting Zaya as a cold, calculating user. The friends who had once listened admiringly to her plans for a glamorous future now looked at her with pity and disdain. The invitations to brunch, to wine-tasting weekends, to shopping trips, all dried up. Her social life, which had been the primary source of her self-worth, evaporated. She was a pariah, a cautionary tale whispered about over $18 glasses of rosé. Finally, the job. The accumulated stress, the public humiliation, and the crushing weight of her new reality took their toll. Her performance at the boutique marketing firm plummeted. She missed deadlines, her creativity vanished, and she snapped at colleagues. She was a ghost of the confident, charming woman who had been a rising star. After 3 months of warnings and performance reviews, she was let go. The garnishment followed her to her next, lower-paying job as an administrative assistant, a constant, unyielding reminder of the man she had betrayed and the quiet, methodical justice he had enacted. 2 years passed. The rain of that tumultuous period gave way to the steady, warm sunlight of a Sacramento summer. Malachi's life, which had been shattered and then meticulously reassembled, was now stronger and more authentic than it had ever been. He thrived. The Curtis Park bungalow was his sanctuary once more. He had painted the living room a calming shade of gray and had spent his weekends tending to the garden in the backyard. What had been a patch of neglected grass was now a thriving oasis of tomato plants, zucchini, and fragrant lavender. He found a deep, grounding satisfaction in nurturing things, in watching them grow. The house felt peaceful, its silence a comfort rather than a void. His 401k, which had taken a brutal hit, was being diligently rebuilt. His automatic contributions continued, and every month a deposit appeared in his bank account, the garnishment from Zaya's paycheck. It wasn't a large sum, just a few $100s, but it was a quiet, constant reminder that accountability was real. It wasn't about the money, it was the principle. It was the slow, steady balancing of a scale she'd tried to tip so violently in her favor. At CalPERS, he had been promoted. He was now a manager leading a small team of 4 junior analysts. Remembering his own discipline path, he started an informal mentorship program for new apprentices, particularly those from working-class backgrounds, who were often intimidated by the colossal world of finance. He would take them for coffee, not at trendy spots like the Mill, but at simple cafes, and explain the power of compound interest, the importance of a 401k, and the freedom that comes from living below your means. He found a new purpose in this, in sharing the wisdom he had earned so painfully. He was building something real, investing in people, not in false promises. One warm Saturday afternoon, he found himself walking through Land Park. For years, he had avoided this neighborhood. It was Zaya's territory, a place that represented her aspirations, her family's judgment, and his own humiliation. But now, as he walked under the canopy of ancient trees, he felt nothing but peace. He saw the sprawling houses not as symbols of a life he couldn't provide, but simply as buildings. The place held no power over him anymore. As he neared the park's famous rose garden, he saw a woman walking toward him. She was pushing a stroller. For a moment his heart caught, thinking it was Zaya. But as she got closer, he saw it wasn't. It was Reina. She saw him at the same moment. Her face froze, a mask of guilt and awkwardness. She quickly looked down, steering the stroller abruptly onto a different path. Malachi just kept walking, his pace unchanged. He felt no anger, no satisfaction at her discomfort. He just felt a quiet sense of distance. They belonged to a different chapter of his life, a book he had finished reading and placed back on the shelf. He eventually did see Zaya, about 6 months after that. He was at a grocery store in a different part of town when he saw her in the checkout line. She looked diminished. Her once vibrant style was gone, replaced by worn jeans and a faded t-shirt. Her hair, which she had always kept perfectly styled, was pulled back in a simple, tired ponytail. She looked older than her years, the easy confidence completely gone, replaced by a permanent frown of worry. Their eyes met for a brief, electric second across the aisles. He saw a flicker of recognition, then shame, then a deep, hollow sadness. He expected to feel a surge of triumph, a final twist of the knife. Instead, he felt a surprising, quiet pang of pity. He gave her a small, almost imperceptible nod, not of friendship, but of acknowledgement, of finality. Then he turned and continued with his shopping. He had forgiven her. He realized it in that moment, not for her sake. She had never asked for forgiveness and probably never would. He forgave her for his own peace. Forgiveness was the final debt he had to clear from his own emotional ledger. It was the act of closing the account for good so that he could be truly free. He walked out of the store and into the bright afternoon sunlight. He had spent 5 years of his life paying off a monetary debt, a burden of $90,000, but he learned the hard way that the most crushing debts are not financial. He had been paying with his time, his energy, and his peace of mind for a love that was never real. True wealth, he now understood, wasn't measured by a salary, the size of a house, or the balance in a retirement account. It was measured in integrity. It was counted in the quiet moments of a peaceful home, in work that had purpose, and in the love of people who valued you for who you were, not for what you could provide. Some betrayals, he reflected, are a strange and painful kind of gift. They burn down the life you thought you wanted, clearing the way for the life you truly need, a life of authentic, unshakable value. Malachi learned that the most important investment you can ever make is in your own peace and self-worth. If his story of quiet strength and methodical justice resonated with you, let us know in the comments below. And for more stories about finding love and value beyond pride, make sure to subscribe to our channel.